Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lucky Life podcast, where we create our own luck and design the life of our dreams. I'm your host, Melissa Merk. Let's dive right into the episode. A little while ago, I put a question box up on my Instagram story, and I asked you guys to leave topic suggestions and questions, and my most common request was to do a podcast on PCOS and hormonal health. So I thought I would talk about how I've pretty much overcome my PCOS symptoms. I can't say cured because technically you can't cure PCOS, but it is just a group of symptoms that you can put into remission. If I go off the rails, I could totally have my symptoms come back. So it does come down to like lifestyle for long-term results. I'm going to start with a bit of a background on me. I think I always assume that my listeners are long-term YouTube subscribers, and I feel like you guys know me, but I know some of you may have just come across this podcast, or maybe you're a new follower from one of my other platforms. So I'm going to give you a little history before we get into it. So I didn't get my first period until I was 15 or 16, which is quite late. And then I didn't get my next one for like 8 months, maybe a year. And then for years after that, it continued where I would only get 1 or 2 periods a year. And I didn't really care at first because it was kind of convenient, to be honest. But I ended up having other symptoms that really bothered me. And that is how I ended up going down the route of like trying to figure out what was going on. So my symptoms were around that same time, like age 15, 16, I started getting pretty bad cystic acne. I fully remember getting ready for school and just like piling on the concealer. And I was and still am a skin picker. So I would just dig craters into my face and then like try to cover that up. And then I would get so frustrated because it wasn't covering. So I'd have to like restart. And then I was so stressed getting ready for school because like my makeup just was not working out. And then I'd go to school and I could not make eye contact with people because I was just so mortified, thinking everyone was just staring at my acne. And that was definitely an insecurity for me growing up. And I know a lot of people can relate to this. So if you have skin issues, I feel you. It is not fun. Another thing I struggled with was excessive hair growth. And I want to say that probably started around the same time. I really can't remember. But yeah, I feel like I had above average, like really coarse hair, like all the way up my thighs and in other areas. I also have very thin skin, and that is not a good combination to have. Anytime I would shave, I would get razor burn and ingrown hairs. Waxing was not an option because the ingrown hairs from that were way worse than shaving. And the worst thing I ever did was epilate. Oh my goodness. I don't know if anyone uses an epilator at this point. It's a really strange contraption. It's basically a bunch of little tweezers on this thing that rotates. And so you roll it on your skin and the tweezers just like pluck out all your hairs. It's really painful. It kind of does a hack job. So I used that, and the ingrown hairs from that were insane. I ended up having scars all up my legs that didn't heal for years. And there was one summer where I don't think I wore shorts or a bathing suit the entire year because my legs just looked so bad. What else? My hair texture was another thing that completely changed around that age. I used to have really thick, silky hair, and then it just started thinning, breaking off. It was really dry and brittle. One of the frustrating things with that is I talk about my hair a lot online because I used to do like hair tutorials, beauty tutorials, and everyone was like, you need to stop bleaching your hair. Not to say that bleach isn't damaging, but it definitely was my hormones that destroyed my hair. And it was so frustrating getting comments like that. And then I ended up getting into extensions for a really long time, which that's just a whole other thing. But there was that. And then I also went through phases in my life where I had extreme fatigue and just like adrenal burnout, which I'll talk about that a bit later as well. As unpleasant as all of these things were, if I didn't have the physical symptoms, I don't think I would have tried to sort out my period. And so they suck to have, but a part of me is glad that I had them because they were like warning signs or like red flags. I don't know, just to like, they let me know that there was something deeper happening, and it led me down the path of trying to figure everything out. Because if it was just my period, I probably wouldn't have really cared. It is something that can lead to other problems down the road. So If you have it, it's definitely something that's good to look into. So those were the symptoms. Going back a bit, I started doing my own research and I basically diagnosed myself with PCOS, but I felt like I should get a doctor to confirm it before I tried doing anything about it. And that was like pulling teeth. Back then, this was like 15 years ago at this point. Like 15, 16 years ago. Nobody was talking about PCOS back then. A lot of doctors didn't even know what it was. And I think like women's hormones the help in that regard was severely lacking. And like, they just like did not care about what I was saying. So it took me years to actually get a doctor to look into it. And I eventually did get a diagnosis. I ended up doing a bunch of blood work, which didn't really come back with much in my case. And then I ended up getting an internal ultrasound and then they found cysts on my ovaries. So that's how I got diagnosed. But to be honest, I don't really think it's that helpful to get a diagnosis. There's not a lot you can do as far as Western medicine goes. If a doctor diagnoses you, they're most likely going to prescribe you birth control, spironolactone, metformin, depending on what your issues are. The medication may help. It works for some people. For me, it didn't. I'll talk about what I've tried. But basically, it'll just like give you a prescription for a medication, send you on your way. I'm not a hater of Western medicine. I definitely think there's a time and a place. And then, like I mentioned, I have tried birth control and spironolactone. So if that is the route you want to go, no judgment. It definitely works for some people. But personally for me, ever since I was young, I have loved everything natural, holistic. And if there's an alternate way to healing besides taking medication, I would way rather go that route. I did do birth control for a while. It didn't do anything for me. It just caused other problems. And then a couple years ago, I tried spironolactone and I think I took it for about a year. It started working for a few months and then it stopped and then I upped my dose. And it started working again and then it stopped. And so I decided to give up because it wasn't giving me the results that I wanted. So that was kind of my experience with trying medications. But like I said, love a holistic option. So I actually decided to go to holistic nutrition school. I did a 2-year course and I graduated from there about a year ago now. So I am a certified holistic nutritionist, in case you didn't know. And my whole reason for getting into that was just because I wanted to be able to help myself, but also with having my online platform. I talk about nutrition a lot, as well as hormonal health and just mainly sharing my experience, but I really wanted to have some sort of credibility and education to back up what I was saying. So that was part of the reason as well. I'm going to go on a little bit of a detour with this conversation because I want to talk a bit about business. I know this is like a bit of a sidetrack, but I've had my certification for about a year now, and I honestly haven't really done a lot with it because I have extreme imposter syndrome in this area of my life. And I actually did a podcast on imposter syndrome, so I need to take my own advice. I keep asking myself, like, what can I do? Like, how can I be more helpful, provide more value? How can I grow my business? Where do I want to take my career? And in the back of my mind and deep down, I always come back to taking on clients and actually working with people. I am thinking about taking on a handful of one-on-one clients. I feel like I need to just dive into this head first because if I don't start, I'm never going to start. I really just want to figure out what people need and how I can structure my services to provide the most value, be the most helpful. I'm not going to be able to figure out all of these things if I'm not working with people. So if you are someone that is struggling with your health, your hormones, if you have PCOS and you are looking for coaching, send me a DM on my health Instagram. It's Melissa Merk Health. I will reach out once I've figured out, I'm probably going to set up like an application page or something. I haven't figured that out yet, but send me a message. Let me know what your health goals are, what you're struggling with, and we can go from there. So that is just a little business chat. And now I will get back to the main topic, which is how I overcame my PCOS symptoms. I know a lot of people are not going to want to hear this, but you can take all the supplements, sea moss, greens powders. You can cut out carbs, gluten, dairy, sugar, seed oils. You can do all of those things, but they're not going to mean much if you're not sleeping well, if you have toxic relationships, you're skipping meals, not getting in the nutrients you need, you're not managing your stress. And then this one is like maybe a little more touchy, but like if you're drinking multiple times a week, I have a separate podcast episode talking about alcohol. I feel like it is so normalized in our social culture and it is so damaging for your hormones. Like your liver is so interconnected with your hormone health and alcohol is so taxing on the liver. I could do a whole episode talking about liver health. I literally went out this past weekend and I was drinking. I'm not going to pretend like I don't drink ever, but it's definitely not a habit of mine anymore. This brings me into one of my things or like one of my core beliefs, I guess, or like how I live my life. I really stand by the 80-20 rule in a lot of aspects of my life. If you're going to stick with something long term, you have to have a bit of flexibility. I eat good meals when I'm at home and I don't drink very often. I work out pretty consistently, but if I take a day off the gym, if I decide to go out for some wine and a greasy dinner, like I'm not stressed about it because it's not something that I do every single day. And I think that's really important to like not be restrictive when you're trying to reach health goals. So that is definitely like a lifestyle habit that I've adopted, is just like 80-20 when it comes to a lot of things. Like I mentioned before, I went through periods of my life where I was extremely exhausted. I just like completely burnt out my adrenals. I've always been a good sleeper, so I could not wrap my head around why I was sleeping 10 hours and then waking up and still being exhausted. But now that I look back at my lifestyle and just like things that were happening during certain times, like I had chronic stress or like went through periods of extreme stress. A lot of it had to do with relationships, honestly. Like it all adds up for the times that I was really struggling with fatigue. And so as far as that goes, there were some supplements that helped, but stress management is definitely number one. Also cutting off toxic people, having quality sleep, not stressing out your body more by depleting yourself, like under eating. That's another thing. I definitely think when I was younger, I was under eating and not on purpose, but I'm just someone like if I get busy, I will skip meals. If I'm traveling, like I never pack snacks. I used to travel a lot and I would barely eat on travel days. So I definitely threw off my nutrition, and skipping meals or going days where you're not eating, that's really bad for your blood sugar. And blood sugar management is huge when it comes to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is super common in PCOS. Eating balanced, consistent meals is definitely another like key thing that I've implemented more. And then there's a ton of other things that I've tried. Like I went through so much trial and error. I found a lot of things that worked, a lot of things that didn't. It took me like 15 years to finally figure out like a routine that I could stay consistent with. I definitely could have sorted things out way sooner than that. Like if you are someone that's struggling, I am not saying it's going to take you 15 years to recover. I'm not a very good patient. I don't stick to a treatment plan. It's like I know what I should be doing and I'm like, oh, I got my period. Oh, my skin cleared up. And then I just ditch everything that I just did and things end up flaring up again. As far as body hair goes though, I did end up doing laser. And I do not even want to know how much I spent on that. That was definitely an investment because I had to go for so many treatments. My legs are basically hairless now. I have to go back like every few months for touch-ups, but I have not had any skin issues with like body hair in a long time. But if you were someone that went through like skin issues related to hair, like definitely recommend laser. As far as my skin and my hair goes, my skin rarely breaks out now. My hair is the best it's been in so many years. And I definitely think that just all comes back to me regulating my hormones. And I really focused on getting my period back because for those years when I was only having 1 or 2 periods, I probably was not ovulating. And if you're not ovulating, you're not making progesterone. And so I was probably severely lacking in progesterone, and that can affect your hair quality. And that also just like throws other hormones out of balance. Estrogen excess or high insulin can cause acne. So it's just like all of these hormones that are out of whack are causing these physical problems. I track my period with my Oura ring. And so you'll get a temperature spike when you ovulate. And it's so satisfying when I see that because I'm like, I'm making progesterone. So that is a win. I definitely still have some room for improvement. I've basically gotten my period to every 2 months, but for the last little bit, I have been getting it monthly because I've like really dialed in my routine. But yeah, I could get like really nitty gritty with like all these little things. I went through a period where I was doing too much. I was getting acupuncture, I was doing castor oil packs, I was taking like 10 different supplements. Don't get me wrong, these things can help. Like, I would not start with those things. Like, you got to get your foundation down before you even bother with like all those extra things. If you find something that you enjoy doing and it works well in your routine and it's really maintainable for you, I think that's great. Castor oil packs, like, I love them, but they were so messy. Like, those were really hard to stick to for me. Also, like, red light therapy, love that. I just like never remembered to do it. I just love that there's all these little like hacks that you can do to help with your hormones and reduce symptoms. But I feel like this may have been a bit of a vague explanation. PCOS is very individualized. Different people experience different symptoms. What works for me might not work for you. That's why it's really important to get testing done. I think getting like a hormone panel can really give you insight into where you might want to start. Can be really helpful to work with a health professional. And also just looking at your lifestyle, like depending on where you're starting from, you could have like an area in your life that would be really beneficial to focus on, and someone else might be totally fine in that area and have a different area in their life that they should work on, if that makes sense. Also, like when it comes down to foods, I absolutely hate certain foods that I know are good for me and that would be good in my diet, but forcing myself to eat them every day is not maintainable. So like finding certain foods that work for you, again, all just like very individualized. I hope this episode was helpful. If you guys have any specific questions, I can definitely do another episode on PCOS or hormones in general. I know there's a way to leave comments on podcasts, so you could leave a comment on this podcast or send me a DM and I will like compile questions and do another episode if you guys have questions. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode. I will chat with you all next week. Until then, have a great life. Bye.